If you are 62 and you have saved over $1 million, then this is something you really need to start getting ahead of. And this is called a required minimum distribution. You've probably heard of this. This is when the government forces you to take out money from all of that tax-deferred investments you've been saving over all these years, that IRA, that 401k, that TSP if you're a federal employee or in the military, the 457s, deferred comps, all of this money through your employer that has gone in without paying taxes. And now over time that has grown and compounded, and now it's worth a significant amount. And now when you take out that money, you have to pay taxes, which over time is going to really force you into higher income tax brackets in most cases if you have over $1 million at this point. And so in today's video, we're going to walk through this concept, and then we're going to walk through some ideas and strategies to make sure that you're ahead of this so that you're not going to be impacted by all of the different ways that this can add havoc into your retirement. But let me first take a step back and say, great job. If you have saved this much, you have done the right thing over all those years. There's nothing to beat yourself up about. But knowing moving forward, we're going to have to make some changes and likely do something different. And that's what we're going to talk about in today's episode of Joe Knows Retirement.
Joe knows taxes.
Joe knows the market.
Joe knows Social Security.
Joe knows income planning.
Joe knows pickleball? No.
This is Joe Knows Retirement.
My name is Joe Schmitz. I'm the CEO and founder of Peak Retirement Planning. We're a retirement planning firm based in Columbus, Ohio. We've got offices in other cities as well, and we've worked with clients all across the country. And many people come to us just from our YouTube channel here because of who we talk about. And we talk about that Midwestern millionaire, or better known as that middle class millionaire. This is actually a concept I'm writing a book about right now. And this is about the people who have been hardworking, frugal, and diligent savers. These are people who have $1 million or more saved up. And because of that, the type of planning that they need is a little more advanced. It's a little bit different. There's no longer any cookie cutter approaches anymore. It's not about just continuing to accumulate these assets. It's now time to look to come down the mountain, to enjoy retirement, to spend the money in retirement, to give the money away in retirement, to give the money away when we pass away. So there's a lot more advanced concepts involved, especially things like RMDs, like we're going to talk about today. How does Social Security tax play a part of all this? When do we take Social Security? What about Medicare premiums? I've heard that the more I make, the more I have to pay for Medicare. All of these different things play together, and that's what we're going to discuss on today's episode. So we know that if you're 62 with over $1 million saved up, then we know that you're in a little unique situation. So your RMD age is still going to be 73. Now understand, if you're born in 1960 or after, so maybe you're a little younger watching this video, your RMD age is going to be 75. So for the sake of this video, we're going to be talking about that age 62, and we're actually going to show you clients of ours who are age 62, and we're going to show you what that would look like over time. And so let's just use a ballpark example. If you have $1 million right now in your IRA, and let's say you don't plan to touch it, you're going to plan to keep it accumulating. Let's say you also don't add to it, just to make things simple. We're going to expect that $1 million to grow to about $2 million at age 73. And simply the reason why is because of the rule of 72. And if we just assume a 6% rate of return or a 7% rate of return, you can expect that your money will double in about 10 to 12 years. And so if you're 62, by the time you're 73, we can assume that 1 million to be 2 million. And so it's also going to depend on the rate of return, right? If you get a 3% rate of return, well, your money won't double for another 20 years. Or if you get a 20% rate of return, well, it's going to double a lot quicker. And so you get the idea of that concept. So we start to see that become an issue for these people because they've saved all of this money, and it only keeps compounding and growing, leading to big tax problems down the road. Because if you have $2 million at 73, now your RMD, they require you to take out 4% at that age. Now you're going to be required to take out $80,000. And if you have a pension or a Social Security on top of that, you're going to push yourself into higher tax brackets, but also you're going to affect other taxes as well. Likely Social Security is going to be fully taxable at that point, meaning 85% of that will be counted as income. Understand, Social Security could be tax-free if your income is low enough. And even with someone like in a scenario we're going to show today, it's going to be really realistic for them to get to that 0% tax bracket, we call it, because they have such a long amount of time at 62. Now, there's going to have to be certain things we're going to have to do so, and it's not going to be perfect for everyone, but for them, it could make sense. sense. Now, that's only part of the story because as we know with RMDs, we know that over time, that withdrawal percentage grows over time. So even though it's 4% starting out, by the time you're 90, that can be 8 or 9% that you're required to take out from your investments. And if your investments continue to grow over time, especially at a rate higher than that 4% withdrawal rate or eventually 5% or 6%, then you're going to grow your assets and your withdrawal rate's going to grow, which is going to lead to you having to take out more money from your investment. So even though it may be $80,000 at 73, what is it going to be at age 80 or 85 or 90? And so that's what we ultimately want to factor here. And so we're going to show you here on the screen. I'm going to show you a chart that just puts all that in picture here of what we just discussed. And so on this chart here, let's say that we're expecting that 6% rate of return. Very reasonable. Obviously, the market's done better than that over time, but we always want to be conservative in our estimates, and I can show you what that looks like at a higher rate as well. But let's just show a 6%. For this particular couple, they had $1.6 million in their IRA, so they had some other assets outside of that as well, but just for their IRAs is what we were factoring in this calculation, because obviously RMDs only factor in IRAs. They don't impact our Roth IRAs, they don't impact non-retirement accounts. You're not forced to take out money from that. And that's one that many people don't understand with the Roth. You know, there's something that we'll talk about within this video as well called a Roth conversion, and that's where you can move money from an IRA to a Roth and pay the taxes on it now versus later. You know, one advantage of doing that is now the Roth is no longer you have to withdraw from it. You can keep that money growing tax-free moving forward, which can be very powerful in your later years of retirement, especially if tax rates go up, especially if you are expecting to be in a higher tax bracket in the future, and also for the fact of legacy. You know, there's something called the widow's penalty where if your spouse passes, well then, you know, you go from married filing jointly tax brackets to single, and that can cause you to pay nearly double the amount of taxes. So something like this can allow you to withdraw money tax-free at that time when it may be most advantageous. So those are things to consider and factor in when you're doing your planning here. And so what we're going to show here is that over time, you know, they have 1.7 million starting out after that 6% growth rate in year one. And again, they're not planning to take this money until 2036 when they're 73, and understand 3.5 million. So remember how I talked about the rule of 72? So 6% rate of return would take 12 years to double. So 1.6, you know, that's going to be about double at that point. And now they're going to have about $3.7 million at that point. And so you can see their first year RMD in this scenario is going to be $152,000. And so again, we work with the middle class millionaire. Some of them may never see annual salaries of $150,000. You know, maybe right around that point, or 100 to 200,000. But what we joke with them is you're literally going to be making more money in retirement, and you're not going to be working, because this is not including Social Security as well. And many of our clients have pensions as well too, from, you know, either, you know, railroad retirement or federal employees or retired military or retired state employee, or they retired from a private company with you know, pensions. And so because of that, that's going to be a much higher income than maybe what they saw in their early years. And you've probably heard the concept, hey, I'll be in a lower tax bracket in retirement. And that's just typically not true for what we see with the Midwestern millionaire, because of all the diligent saving that they've been doing and because of the place that they've positioned themselves in. And so you'll see, as I explained earlier, it starts at 152,000, but over time, look how it just continues to creep up over time. And you'll see by the time 2052 comes around, it's about $309,000 that's going to be, you know, required to withdraw from. And then you'll see over time, you know, in 2057, that could be a $348,000 withdrawal at that time. So if you think about it, let's just look at 2050 here as an idea. So 2050, that would put them around, what, age 87 or so, because they're 62, and, you know, 25 years from now. So right around that ballpark, and they're going to have to withdraw $286,000 a year. That's quite a bit of money. You know, again, they're forced to do this. They're not getting to choose, well, I don't want to take it out. Let's just keep it in there and let it keep growing. No, you have to take it out. You have to pay taxes, and you lose the tax advantages moving forward, because if you do want to reinvest it, typically what we see is they're going to have to reinvest into a non-retirement account, which is then taxed at capital gains on the growth. So you have to pay taxes coming out, and then you have to pay taxes on the growth moving forward as well. And so, you know, again, the Roth conversion idea that we mentioned earlier, this can allow you to avoid that capital gain and future issue down the road if you have it in a Roth, because in a Roth, it all grows tax-free, and when you withdraw it, you're not going to have to reinvest it like this IRA example here that we're talking about. But one thing I really want to pinpoint here is, again, age 87, and they've got about $4 million there. Now you start to see that the tides change here. You start to see that, it goes from 4 million, then it starts to actually go down instead of up like it did all the other years. And the reason why is because of that withdrawal rate change that I mentioned. So again, here at 286,000, they're supposed to withdraw. That's more than 4% of what the account balance is. That's a generous amount that they're having to withdraw each year, and it's about 8% in that scenario. And so because of that, you'll see that this is not going to grow at more than an 8% rate because we showed a 6% estimate there. So you have to think, though, let's say that life expectancy is right around 87, you pass away, and you've got $4 million. So even if you didn't do anything, yes, you're going to have huge tax issues, and you're not going to be able to maximize your situation in most cases, but you still are left with $4 million and able to take out all that money. So what I'm trying to emphasize there is that you've got a lot of money here if you've got over $1 million, and it's going to be hard to spend all that money in retirement. So we have other videos that we've talked about of having purpose with your money, of what do you want to do with this? Do you want that last dollar to bounce back? If so, maybe we need to start spending more now, or do we want to leave just a huge impact when we pass and leave a bunch to a charity or someone or family or whoever, or do we want to give while we're living, or maybe spend and give, right? So you can do any of those combination, but the key is to have a plan, because this is your money. This is what you've worked hard for, and you can't pull a U-Haul behind your hearse when you pass away. And so we need to find what is that significance that we want to see. And so let's even stick there on that 2050 year, age 87. I mean, again, you're taking out $300,000-ish a year, and you have Social Security on top of that, which may see some cost of living adjustments as well. So that could creep up to $100,000 or more, depending on how much you're getting there. And maybe you have a pension as well. Let's say you have a pension worth $50,000. Well, now your income is going to be, what is that, $450,000 a year at that point, which is probably going to force you into higher tax brackets and be a huge concern. But here's what most of our clients are worried about with these large required minimum distributions. And again, this is something we work with our clients every day on. The majority of our clients have $1 million or more in their IRAs. I've actually wrote an article in Kiplinger on this about if you have $1 million or more, you need to be aware of this. And it talks about a lot of the concepts we're talking here, just makes it a little more concise in writing. So if you like to read Kiplinger articles, that one's a great one. It's actually one of our most popular Kiplinger articles. So we get featured in Kiplinger twice a month, and that one's got one of the most views when they track that. So something you may enjoy there. So what they're worried about, though, is Medicare premiums is one of the biggest concerns. And remember, Medicare premiums, you don't get better health care the more you have to pay in Medicare, right? But it's all based on your income. So if you have a lower income, you're going to pay the base tier, but the higher income goes, then you may pay tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, and so on, and it just gets significantly more in cost. And so we run some analysts with our clients where if they do nothing, they're going to have to pay $5,000 to $10,000 more a year in Medicare, whereas if they have a plan and we're able to start getting ahead of some of this stuff, then we're going to be able to start to decrease our income in retirement by doing things like a Roth conversion that we've been talking about, so that when they do withdraw money in retirement, they can still live and enjoy it, but it's coming from a Roth where it's tax-free and it doesn't count as income in those important years. So if you are 62, understand that this year can be a very viable option for you to do some Roth conversions, because you're not having to worry about those increased Medicare costs if you raise your income this year. And the reason why is because Medicare costs don't start to get calculated until you're 63. And I know you may be a little confused because you say, Joe, we don't run Medicare until 65. What are you talking about? And that's true, but they look back 2 years at your age 63 income to determine how much you're going to have to pay in Medicare that year. So something to be aware of. And then the other thing to be aware of is, maybe you're 62 in late 2024, and then you're not going to be 63 until December of 2025. Well, understand that, you're only going to really have to pay increased Medicare costs for that year of 1 month, technically, when you're 65, right? And so that could be a reason to blitz the next 2 years of depending on when your birthday, versus if your birthday is January of 2025 and you're 63 that year, now you're going to be 65 in January, now you're going to have the 4 years. So hopefully that makes sense to you, but something to understand in planning, where even though someone may be 63, we still may blitz the Medicare tiers because we're only going to have to be impacted for 1 or 2, 3 months maybe, depending on when their birthday is. So, that can make it worthwhile to try to use up that space if you're right in that range of that 62 to 63 time frame there. So another thing to worry about is Social Security. And there's so many different concepts of Social Security. And understand, I'm not making a recommendation when I talk about Social Security of the best time to take it. Some people take it at 62, some people take it at 70, and we recommend any age. A lot of it depends on what your health is. As I always joke, tell me when you're going to die and I'll tell you when to take it. But something that could be utilized here is if you don't need the income and you've got this much saved, you could look to defer Social Security till, let's say, 70 as an example. And in doing so, that's going to give you 8 years if you're 62 right now to start doing some Roth conversions, to start moving some of these IRAs to Roth and lower these RMDs eventually when 73 comes. Or you can start living off of these IRAs right? You can do both. You can live off these IRAs, start bringing down this account balance. So when you get to 73, you're not as impacted to this. And the advantage is now your Social Security is going to be nearly double the amount versus taking it at 62 and taking it now. And so that's something that you just have to factor into your planning to see if that would be valuable for you to do. Another reason of doing that is for the spousal benefit. When one spouse passes, you keep one of the two Social Securities. The lower one goes away, you keep the higher of the two. And so that's a way that you can make sure your spouse is left with the highest amount of Social Security possible moving forward. So again, all of those are ideas. They're not recommendations, but you just have to think through it of how this is going to work. And if you do it that way, your RMD could be significantly reduced by that point because you could just be withdrawing from a Roth for any extra income, or the Social Security is much higher now, so you're not going to have to withdraw as much from your investments for income, and all of that can play together very well. So, and using up the lower brackets now without that added Social Security income can really allow you to convert even more at this point without worrying about your Social Security to be taxable. And I think I talked about at the beginning of the video here, where if you are smart about your tax planning and retirement, if you do enough Roth conversions and you take enough withdrawals from your IRA, you could get to a point where you are what I call living a tax-free retirement, where you legally divorce the IRS for life. Now, if you have a pension, this may not be realistic because your pension's always going to force you into higher brackets, and it may always force your Social Security to be taxable depending on how much that pension is. But for some of our clients who don't have pensions, and let's say in this scenario, this is a real life example of a client where we're going to expect them not have to pay taxes in the future by doing Roth conversions now, by delaying Social Security, by making sure that we're aware of the Medicare premiums, and in doing all of that, we're going to be able to get their tax deferred dollars in a low enough amount of space. We don't want to get to zero because there's something called the standard deduction. And the standard deduction says that you can take out $30,000 of income every year and not have to pay federal taxes on that. And so if we're going to be able to time up their withdrawals from their IRA in the future to be under that limit, then they don't have to pay any taxes on any of the IRA withdrawals they make. And if everything's in a Roth, as we've talked about, yes, we have to pay the taxes now, but we won't have to later. And so you have to do the math to see, does it make sense to pay the tax now versus later? And I can tell you that most cases it does, but you just have to factor it in of how it works in your specific situation. And we typically recommend, as you can imagine, we don't want to do these Roth conversions all at once. We want to do them over a period of time. And again, 62 to 70 can be a really sweet spot to do that, even 62 to 73 before the RMDs start. And understand, once RMDs start at 73, you can still do conversions after that. You just have to take out your RMD first. And so something we tell people is, hey, we're going to take out, let's say your RMD at that point is $20,000. And let's say that we want to do a $100,000 Roth conversion at that time. All right, so we'll take out the $20,000. Instead of having it go to our bank account, we'll withhold 100% taxes to the IRS to pay for those taxes, and then we'll convert the $100,000 on top of that. So just a real pro tip strategy that we do with some of our clients who are in that age range or preparing for that age range of what we expect to do with their planning. So hopefully those are all ideas for you to take and learn from and move along better. And so I want to go back to the chart here before we conclude on the video today and just review here, what if we change the rate of return from 6% just to 8%? What does that look like over time? And so obviously you'll see here that it's going to increase pretty dramatically. So by the time that 12 years rolls around, 2037, you're going to see that it's going to be about almost $5 million there. And now our RMD goes from $150,000 based on a 6% return to 8% is $197,000. So you can see that if you see some compounded growth here during this period of time, your RMDs are going to be even more significant. And so I'm not saying we don't want this. I'm just saying this is something you want to be aware of. And then over time, you can see we talked about 2050 earlier. Now your RMD is closer to $500,000 versus the $300,000 we showed earlier. And you can see how all that plays a part. And so a pro tip that we typically look at with clients, let's say you are looking to have some Roth conversions now, or maybe you already have some money in Roth. Typically, we want to put more of our aggressive type investments, our growth oriented type investments in the Roth, because all that grows tax-free. Versus if we have it in an IRA, let's say you do want to have a protected portion of your plan, like a lot of the clients we work with do. They don't want everything in protection. We'd say that they can take as much risk as they want or as little risk as they want. But let's say they want to just protect, 20% or 30% or 40% of their portfolio. Well, maybe we want to do that portion in the IRA because maybe that's only going to see a 4 or 5% growth rate over time. And if that's the case, then we're not going to have to worry about as increased RMDs over time, right? Because if we only see a 4% growth rate in this investment, you'll see that the RMD is going to be 116,000, again, less than 150. So I'm not saying it's ever good not to have more growth, right? That's not the point of this. But the point is that we may not want to have all of our money in the market, which could do a 6, 7, 8% return each year and has historically, but we're going to deal with a lot of ups and downs, and that may not be smart for our income planning of when we need to withdraw funds for our early years of retirement, especially if we are planning to delay Social Security and we need to take out, $80,000 to $120,000 a year or whatever you may need to live on. And so we may want to make sure that money's protected, and so make sure it's in an IRA, and then you also won't have to worry about as much growth in that vehicle, and then you can have the rest of your money be very growth oriented, grow over time in the Roth, and have some really good traction there. So that's just some pro tips again for you as you plan out your retirement. So at the end of the day, what this comes down to is just having a plan, making sure you're prepared for these required minimum distributions. We can't wait until 73 to start planning. We've got to plan now. And if you haven't done anything to plan for this in the past, can't get those years back, but we can get the years ahead, planned for and accomplished. And so the key is to just make sure you get moving on this and just have a plan. Some of these strategies, it depends on your situation, right? And so you're really going to want to work with a professional team to ensure you're in the right spot. And if you're looking for more information on this, we actually have a tax-free retirement toolkit, we call it. And in that includes my book called I Hate Taxes, where we talk heavily about a lot of the topics we talk about here today in this video, especially the impact of required minimum distributions for those diligent savers over their time. And so if you'd like that, we'll send you a free copy if you just request down below in the link, and we'll send you that so you can have that. I know we've got a lot of viewers here on YouTube, and if you're stayed along all the way till the end of this video, then I'm sure you're really interested in learning more, and we'd love to get that in your hands. So hopefully that can be valuable for you. And with that being said, that's all we've got on today's episode of Joe Knows Retirement.